Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, should a woman impregnated by her rapist be allowed to have an abortion? We look at an extreme and violent case in Turkey that has renewed debate over women's rights and reignited the country's culture war. Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for your live feedback. Malika, I've had TweetDeck open on my desk all day long, and I cannot believe the number of people just constantly tweeting about this subject today.
There are a lot, and from what I'm seeing, the opinion seems to be split. And people don't know whether they think that it should be, whether or not they think abortion should be okay in the case of rape or not. So for those of you at home, answer that question for us. Tweet us your thoughts at AJ Stream.
And joining us on set is Omer Taspinar. He's the senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, where he focuses on Turkey, the European Union, Muslims in Europe, and political Islam. Omer, welcome to the stream.
Thank you for having me.
Remember, this show is powered by you, our online community. So if you want to share your feedback or suggest a topic for us to cover, let us know. Just follow us on Twitter at AJ Stream, and you can be part of the stream. Now, here are some of the hashtags we're following. What would drive a woman to shoot a man 10 times, stab him, and then behead him? In Turkey, 26-year-old Nevin Yildirim did just that to a man who'd allegedly raped her for 8 months. She would then walk into a coffee shop, hurl his severed head onto a table, and reportedly say, "Don't talk behind my back, don't play with my honor. Here is the head of the man who played with my honor." Now, pregnant, allegedly with his baby, Nevin's case has focused attention on Turkey's abortion laws. She's currently 29 weeks pregnant, past the legal limit to terminate a pregnancy, which is 10 weeks. And while in prison awaiting trial for murder, she has appealed to have an abortion. But this week, the court ruled against it. And this case has once again sparked a debate and split society over reproductive rights. But it's not the first time. In May, Turkish Prime Minister Recep Erdogan called abortions a murderous act and proposed a bill that would have reduced the timeline for an abortion to the first 6 weeks of pregnancy. After some intense street protests against the measure, Parliament scrapped the proposal. So for women in Turkey who are victims of sexual and domestic abuse, what protections are there? And could Nevin's case have been prevented, or did religion and culture get in the way? Joining us to discuss this from Istanbul is Ayşe Taksas. She's a member of the Social Feminist Collective, which raises awareness on women's issues and rights in Turkey. And with us from New York is Dr. Zehra Arat, professor of political science at Purchase College, State University of New York. She teaches courses on women's rights and gender politics and Islam. Both of you, welcome to the stream.
Hello.
Ayşe, I want to start with you. Many consider Nevin's case and her actually to be the poster child for so much of what is wrong in Turkey when it comes to women's rights. You know, and while the extreme violence in her case might be unusual, talk about how unusual these circumstances are for women in Turkey, and then also give us an update on where her case is right now.
Actually, although the case seems very extreme at first, we can't really say that it's very unusual for women in Turkey, because especially during the last years, we have seen this increase in the rates of women killings, but also rape, and all these cases, I mean, all kinds of crimes against women. And what is more outrageous is that most of these crimes go with impunity. So usually the criminals or the rapists do not receive the penalties that they deserve, which to my mind feeds into this cycle of violence. We can say that today violence against women in Turkey has become more or less a usual thing. And the misogyny is at an incredible level. So again, I repeat myself, although it seems extreme, it's only a more maybe intense version of what many women in Turkey live today.
And where does her case stand today?
In what sense?
She's in prison awaiting trial. Is there anything going on the ground that you're hearing in regard to that?
We heard that she's now going into some medical examinations, which will hopefully find out whether she can go along with this pregnancy or not. Because although she has exceeded the legal limits of 20 weeks in case of rape, still she presumably can have an abortion if it is medically documented that she cannot safely give birth to that child.
All right.
So we are still waiting for the decision.
Omer, I want to talk about the circumstances of this. It's an atrocity in so many senses of the word, but Naveen killed the man who was allegedly raping her for 8 months, who impregnated her, and she did it, she said, to get her honor back. And in a society where there's so much focus on these honor killings, and it is so violent and repudiated by the world and by women in that country. Talk a little bit about the psychology of what's going on here, because it seems to be very revealing about the underpinnings of what honor means in this culture for a woman to turn around and do a reverse honor killing.
That's right. Well, as you mentioned, honor killings are not really new in Turkey, but it's usually men killing women who believe that basically their honors were tainted, or basically to save the family honor. So it's not very often that we see a woman killing the perpetrator in such a sense. But I agree with what has been said, that this is a large problem in Turkey. Turkey is still a conservative Muslim society, but it is rapidly urbanizing. So you have this clash in Turkey between tradition, often Muslim tradition, which values really issues such as honor, dignity, virginity of women, and Turkey never had, in a Western sense, really an industrial revolution, a sexual revolution. Women's rights really are not comparable yet in Turkey to where they are in the West. But it is also a rapidly urbanizing country where you have this clash between tradition and modernity, rapidly urbanizing. And the media plays a major role in basically shaping the stereotypes of women. And you have a lot of people who are impacted by this rapid change. And in that sense, honor killings now are becoming a bigger problem because we learn more about them. They were probably there in the 1970s, in the 1960s, but as society is changing more rapidly, as you have basically more of a media impact on households, you have probably more awareness of such problems. And in that sense, I think we have to put this event, this tragedy, into a larger context of a Muslim country that has basically a secular system trying to come to terms with a better balance between tradition and modernity. And those are big issues that will take time to solve.
Well, Dr. Zahra Arat, our community here is split, but there are also nuance. There's a tweet from Nasdahan who says, rape brings so much shame to victims' families in Turkey. Naveen Yildirim is lucky to tell her tragic experience to the world. There's another from Francois who says, on abortion, I'd say that Mrs. Yildirim's self-defense is complete with the death of her rapist. The child must be given a chance. But then he follows that up to say, Naveen couldn't have gone to the police earlier because she would have been called a scorned woman. That's a cultural issue. How are Turks reconciling these two things?
Well, I'm not sure about the overall Turkish public reaction to this, but I would like to point out that this particular event is taking getting so much media attention, not because of the act of shooting or killing, but what came afterwards, that is like her reaction is considered to be so extreme that severing the head of a dead body is the key element that make this story different than several other stories. If we examine the statistics and on crime committed by women, look at the violent statistics, violent acts, actually an overwhelming number of women would be in prison because of either for defending their honor or defending their body from some violent act or some kind of, again, other injustice that they face from most likely to be an acquaintance or an intimate partner. So what we are kind of actually perhaps missing the forest for the trees is the backdrop. This is like the culture itself that restricts women, and women cannot share the information about the kinds of injustices and violence that they experience with their immediate relatives, and there is no support offered by the state. So in case of Nevin Yildirim, she couldn't tell this, like what we understand from some of the, again, this like this gathered information coming through media. She has been repeatedly raped by this relative in the absence of her husband, who is away working in another town. And so she couldn't share this information with anybody else.
You know, and Aisha, I want you to pick up on that, because if you can't share the experiences with your family and you can't share them with police, the logical step forward from that is that there is an enormous amount of underreporting when it comes to violence against women in Turkey. I want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's for sure. As Zehra was talking about, it is not a very open society where women can share their experiences, their problems, or even the violence that they are subject to with anybody. And even when they try to do it, the state institutions are not very responsive to it. It's one of the biggest challenges before us right now, because women, I mean, in the last years, there's this raising awareness, and women have started to go to the police when they are being beaten by their husbands. And you cannot believe how many women who have been reporting to the police and getting, or maybe not, those, anyway, protection orders or not, have been killed by their husbands.
And it's that lack of support that our community members are picking up here. Ruwaid on Twitter says, Turkey does not respect women's rights, nor does it have institutions which monitor the progress of women, similar to other MENA countries. Omar, I'd like you to have a listen to this video commenter that says something along the same lines.
Almost inevitable result reflecting the feelings of a raped woman in Turkey, pushed to a catastrophic corner, who feels lonely and vulnerable in front of the social and legal institutions. If the institutions in Turkey were actually able to handle rape cases, she wouldn't have ended up with becoming a murderer. But now, after this brutal murder, she can raise her voice without facing with all the suspicious comments, whether she had consent for it, coming from a policeman, doctors, nurses, lawyers, neighbors, and maybe even her family.
Well, she says the institutions aren't equipped to handle cases like this. Is that true?
It's true, and this is, in my opinion, not just a legal problem or an institutional problem. This is a product of Turkish political culture, Turkish social culture. Turkey is a very patriarchal society. As I said, it is also a Muslim society, but it is rapidly changing. And I think in times when you have this clash between basically Western values and modernization and traditional values, you have, I think, more of a polarization in society. It is unfortunate that the current government is not taking steps forward in terms of improving the situation. And what needs to be done in many ways is basically to start with the legal system, but also to change the education system, to fight with the stereotypes, and to have a awareness-raising program. But these things take time, and when you have a conservative government, and when you have a prime minister who basically makes declarations about abortion being a crime, it doesn't help. There was a time when this current government was much more willing to follow harmonization of laws with the European Union. But unfortunately, the European Union agenda in Turkey has kind of diminished, and no one is really excited about it anymore. That's partly because Europe is not excited about having Turkey, and so it's not just Turkey that needs to be blamed here. But what we see in Turkey is the continuation of this patriarchal culture and a minority of voices fighting against it. Turkey, in my opinion, does not have a very strong feminist movement yet. It doesn't have really the legal and institutional framework, but most importantly, there's a problem of political culture and a very patriarchal political culture.
Zehra, along the lines of this political culture, I gotta say, Erdogan and Parliament look pretty good on paper. I mean, if you just look in the last year, last March, they passed laws to put electronic monitoring bracelets on men. They have police undergoing training in terms of how to recognize violence against women. They've got these specialized police anti-violence units they've set up. They've increased the sentences for honor killers. Why are these things not effective?
Well, a few things I would like to say about this. One of the things, like Ömer mentioned, when Erdogan government first came to power, actually it's like the AKP. It was Abdullah Gül who was the prime minister in the first AKP government. When we look at the government program, it reads like a human rights manifesto. And this is the fourth AKP government. And in time, when we look at these various actually government programs, we see human rights becoming a marginal element within the context of the whole document. So there is that lack of interest. That is like the AKP used to see itself, and from now and then also plays as a victim of human rights abuses in Turkey, because religious based parties were not allowed to exist for a long time and banned frequently. So that's one thing that is it has been changing. And the other thing is yes, the Turkish candidacy to EU called for some legislative reforms, which started, we have to stress, before the AKP government came to power. It started in the late 1990s. And AKP continued with that. But in fact, Prime Minister Erdogan said that Copenhagen criteria are the criteria set for the members, candidates to become members. And it includes respect for human rights, democratization, and establishing rule of law. And Erdogan repeatedly said that we are ready to continue with these reforms, making the Copenhagen criteria, Ankara criteria, if the EU does not respond to our candidacy in a positive way. But ironically, that is like the again, AKP gained more confidence, and especially after the second landslide victory in 2007 elections, gained so much confidence, then it started to undermine the reform process, and started to become more and more conservative and repressive.
And some of that confidence is coming from supporters like Sita on Twitter, who says it's not like the women's rights were in a better degree in the past, so people should stop blaming the prime minister, she says. But on the other hand, Ömer, this is not all just politics. Have listened to this video commenter.
Hi, it's Göktuğ from California again. I'd like to point out that in Turkey, women have absolutely no safety. They are beaten on the streets, culture honor killings in every city, which absolutely have nothing to do with the religion of Islam, but it's their culture and their ignorance. I have a 1-year-old baby daughter myself, and I don't know what I would do if anybody were to treat her bad or even with disrespect. It's totally unacceptable.
Politics can only go so far if the underlying culture still accepts this.
In a way, that's what I mean by the patriarchal culture of Turkey. And yes, it's not fair to just blame the prime minister, but there has to be leadership. There has to be basically a voice coming from the top which would say this is wrong, we're not supporting it. Yes, there are actually some legal steps being taken in that direction, but overall, it doesn't help when you have really a conservative party in power which basically does not really believe in gender equality. The prime minister has given speeches where his belief in gender equality, it came across as basically very questionable. And he has a conservative view of women, that basically they should stay at home, have 3 kids.
He did say he believed in equal opportunity, though.
He believes in equal opportunity, but basically he believes also that in a traditional, good Muslim society, women should raise children and ideally should have a different agenda than trying to always look for job opportunities. So there's a worldview problem to a certain degree, but there is also a problem beyond just the political party in charge. We have to look at what the other political parties are saying. We have to look at basically the media reaction. We have to look at the civil society groups. And we don't see this issue really dominating the agenda in Turkey. Turkey is a country where basically you have many problems. And usually the most important problem of the country focuses on terrorism and the Kurdish question. And the big debate is on that issue. So issues related to women's rights or issues related to minority rights are secondary and they don't get enough traction with the media or civil society groups. It's only usually in more obscure areas that we get a discussion on these issues. So what needs to be done, in my opinion, is a more targeted campaign coming from the government, but also stronger mobilization at the societal level. And it's true that this is not an issue just about Islam versus secularism. But I would take issue with some of the comments that basically the situation in the Arab world is much better. I would argue that in Turkey, compared to many Arab countries, still the female woman participation and gender rights are at a better level. This is partly because of the secularist tradition of the country, what has been achieved in the past, and partly because of the European Union process that actually managed to harmonize some of the laws. And a final point I like to make is that the current government usually tended to see the women's rights issue through the lenses of the headscarf problem in Turkey. Someone like you, Malika, up until recently would not be able to go to college in Turkey, to public school.
Oh, Mayor, I'm going to have to stop you right there, but we're going to pick up on that point in our online post show. But we do want to get over to Malika. She's got a couple leads we're following before we end the program. Malika?
In the wake of the anti-Islam trailer that's sparking violent protests across the Middle East, U.S. Muslim rapper Lupe Fiasco has launched an online campaign to counter those messages. Would the Prophet be angry at a depiction of him? I think he's seen worse. You're playing into the hands of your enemies, he writes, before kicking off a series of tweets using the hashtag Muhammad showed me. Prophet Muhammad taught me to be respectful of others and patient in the face of ridicule, he adds. The tag has spread, getting more than 15,000 mentions as netizens explain what Islam's prophet means to them. Muhammad showed me to tolerate others despite not being tolerated, Layla tweets. While Prince Mustafa says, Muhammad showed me to be kind to my neighbor no matter how much wrong they've done to me. You can find more of those responses on our website at stream.aljazeera.com. That campaign isn't the only reaction making waves online. The anti-Islam trailer and ensuing protests also seem to be causing diplomatic tensions. Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood retweeted this message of condolences following clashes at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo over the clip. But the embassy tweeted back, "Thanks. By the way, have you checked out your own Arabic feeds? I hope you know we read those too." The Twitter account for the Brotherhood responded asking for the specific Arabic tweet in question, but as of yet, the embassy hasn't clarified. Other Twitter users have. "Let me break it down to you," writes Fahad, calling the Muslim Brotherhood hypocritical. "Your Arabic feed is calling for protests," he says. We want you to weigh in on this story. Tweet us your thoughts at hashtag AJStream. Lisa?
All right, stay with us because the post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. Now, on Monday, is Europe about to welcome a new state? We turn to Spain to examine Catalonia's increasingly popular separatist movement. So tweet us your thoughts on that. And until then, we'll see you online. Welcome back to the Stream's online post show. We're still discussing abortion and women's rights in Turkey, and I want to pick up where we left off with Omer Tasmanar. You were saying things are starting to change.
That's right. The current party, the incumbent party in power, when they came to power, one of the gender right agendas that they had was basically to legalize the right to wear headscarves to universities. And that was an uphill struggle. I mean,
Right.
Turkey came close to a military coup because of this problem.
Of course, I remember the case of Merve Kavakcı, the
Yes, Merve
parliamentarian.
Kavakcı. But the current president of Turkey, because his wife is wearing the headscarf, was in the eyes of the Turkish military, which is the guardian of secularism, was a problematic candidate. So the headscarf was a very polarizing issue, and it went to the heart of the gender question in Turkey. And the current party had this narrative of victimhood, that basically their sisters, their wives were not able to, their kids were not able to receive equal treatment. And they fought for this, but I think they focused on this narrow agenda of the headscarf at the expense of some other gender right issues. But this is why I think the Turkish culture war, up until recently, were really focused on this question of whether you can wear the headscarf or not. This is now partially solved. Now students wearing headscarves can go to universities. The next step would probably be whether they can have public jobs, whether they can become public servants, because there's a dress code in Turkey. So now I think we're beyond that, and there is a new culture war with certain degree with this question of abortion or other issues, and that's to a certain degree a healthy development, because the headscarf issue was really something that was taking the country in a very polarized direction. And now the debate, I think, is more similar to what took place in Western societies. The abortion debate in the United States is not resolved as we know it. In some European countries there are major problems, and it's a healthy thing that Turkey is trying to come to terms with these things, but it is really at its infancy. And we have to understand that this is still a country that is traditional, Muslim, modernizing, and it will take a while for women in Turkey to have the same rights that women enjoy in Western liberal, democratic, post-industrial societies.
You know, Aisha, I'm curious. So much of our discussion today has focused on a lack of women's rights in Turkey and violence against women. We've had video questions, or video comments rather, from some folks living in Turkey saying it's not unusual to see a woman beaten in the street. There seems to be very little compunction about violence toward women. As an activist there, do you find yourself in danger, or do you ever feel that your colleagues are in danger for speaking out on these issues?
Actually not. And I don't think that there's any threat posed towards us because we are voicing those opinions. And I also want to say that I don't think that explaining this issue on the basis of tradition, of backwardness, is not a good idea, because, you know, culture is not a static thing. It's always open to change, and it always interacts with what is going on around. So the problem that we are seeing here are not reducible to Islam or to tradition, but they are very much the product of contemporary things that happen in politics. For instance, yes, AKP is a conservative party, but it is also the carrier of free market ideology in Turkey. So the violence has also been explained on the basis of political economy, ideology. So of course there is tradition. It is not non-existent, and people make use of it in making sense of their lives, but it is not the only factor in the equation.
Zahra, do you agree with that?
Yes, that is like we have to look at two layers. That is a societal, which has been conservative overall, and at the political level. Now, what we see actually, the conservative norms being sanctioned by the political agenda. AKP came out as an advocate of the headscarf rights of women as an element of freedom of religion. Women, several women who were covering their heads, on the other hand, actually put it on a different dimension. They wanted to be able to go to attend universities or have public employment, public service, join the public service and with their hair covered, and they actually put it as an element of right to education and right to work. So AKP undermined these elements. AKP subscribes to a fairly restrictive and conservative interpretation of Islam, follows the notion of fitrat, which is an essentialist way of looking at sexes. So men and women are not equal to begin with in God's creation, and they cannot do the same thing, and they cannot be expected to do the same things and enjoy the same rights.
And we're talking about politics here. Neslihan on Twitter says, clearly Turkish politics is a job designed for men exclusively. It needs more women with expertise and a clear vision for the future. But Zahra, I'd like you to have a listen to this video commenter.
I don't think any woman can be against abortion rights. I can't imagine that. And I certainly think women have right to choose whether or not.
It looks like it cut off, but she was asking a question about women and politics in Turkey.
Well, it is in the parliament. It's actually a very sad picture we have there. For the first time in 2007 elections, that is like the women reached a point of over 9% in the parliament. It has been always less than that, sometimes not even reaching 1%. At the local level, it's less than 1%, which is an actually peculiar thing about Turkey, because in most countries we see women's representation to be higher at local level and diminishing at the national level. And in Turkey, that's the other way around. So women do not have much of a political voice. And I will actually disagree with Omar on one point. There is a viable women's movement. There has been since the mid 1980s, and because of their activism, some of the things that AKP, they could use the external pressure to pressure the AKP government as well. On penal code, for example, adultery was going to be criminalized by the AKP government, but women's groups, including some of the so-called Islamist women, joined the secular women and demanded the adultery being decriminalized.
Okay, Zara, thank you. Mary, we've got about a minute left in the show. Wrap us up in terms of where things are going from your perspective here.
Well, I'm a glass half full person, so I think Turkey, when you compare Turkey with the rest of the Islamic world, and we need to compare Turkey with the Islamic world to a certain degree because it's a 99% Muslim country, is taking steps in the right direction. Overall, I'm not very alarmist about the situation in Turkey. As Turkey is becoming more democratic, as the Turkish economy is growing, lifestyles are changing. But this is a generational issue. It's going to take time for women in Turkey to have the same rights that women enjoy in the West.
All right. Omer, thank you so much. Zahra, Aisha, thank you. And thanks to our online community for a great show today. Now, on Monday, is Europe about to welcome a new state? We're going to turn to Spain to examine Catalonia's increasingly popular separatist movement. So tweet us your thoughts on that. And until then, we'll see you online.